Hi, everyone. We're so glad to have you joining us again today for a Friday Forum. My name is Cyndy McDonald. I'm an educator, an entrepreneur, and a business coach. And it is my pleasure to invite guests, experts to come and share information and conversations with you about subjects that you care about. So as you're joining us today, I'm going to have as my guest Marc Gray. Hi, Marc.
Hey, Cindy, thanks for having me.
And Marc, I'd love for you to see who's here and where they're from. So as you're joining us today, put in your name and your location, and we want you to answer the question, do you blog? And I have some answers to that. Marc's going to talk about that today, but we want to know where you're at in your organization or the things that you do. And so that is an important aspect as we try to promote our brands. And we've been talking a lot about brands this year in 2024, and you'll hear me talk about a lot more as well. I'm actually doing workshops on that and building your brands, looking at archetypes. And this is such a content-rich profession that we're in that it's important to be able to share who you are and what you stand for. And blogging is an important way to do that. So as you're coming in, put in your name and your location, and you can see, Marc, that we've got lots of people here already. And lots of people have different aspects of blogging. As you're coming in and adding your information, I just want to give you a little bit of information about Marc, my guest today. Marc Gray is the founder and director of education for Odyssey College Prep. I've known Marc for quite a while, and I know he uses advanced aptitude testing to simplify the college admissions process, not only for students, but for parents as well. I think this is really important. I've often taught in my UCLA classes and other things that I do that self-reflection is the first step of what we do with students. If they don't know who they are and what they're looking for, how in the world can they figure out where they're going? So I think that's really important. Marc also guides students to create targeted passion projects, and we're seeing more and more of that as part of this process, and those projects help differentiate student college applications. He also serves as the Highlands Aptitude Battery Company's ambassador to Council More, and some of you are familiar with Highlands Aptitude Battery. Other people do other aptitude tests. I know several people who use this, and so this is another role that Marc has. And in that role, he enjoys helping other college counselors use aptitude testing to enhance their business. Marc is also an active member of Council More's community, and you'll hear more about that. And he and I have talked about that, and I've been invited to be a part of that community. Some of you might have seen me there. He hosts Council More's mentorship community roundtable discussion, where college counselors can learn from one another. And we all enjoy doing that and instruct each other in best practices. So, Marc, so glad to have you here today.
It's really fun to be here. So I'm interested in getting into this. The blogging topic, it's one that doesn't come up a lot in a lot of the the IEC circles that we're in. And I have very few instances where I'm able to nerd out about it, like as deeply as I hope we're able to today. So it's a pleasure, and thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. So it looks like we've got some people, I'm seeing a lot of no, I don't, but I'd like to, wanting to blog our newsletter, and we'll talk about that. Gillian said she blogs, Karen blogs, don't blog yet. I like that attitude. So this is, looks like we've hit on a topic that is really important for our community to learn a little bit more about. So how long have you been writing blogs, Marc?
Short answer, since 2019, but I wouldn't say that I got serious in really, being efficient and, really trying to study up and use, good SEO practices until about 2021.
So how did you learn that you needed to do that? How did you learn to make your blogs more effective?
Sure. So I don't, quick story. I don't know if everyone else kind of grew their business the same way I did, but when I started out, right, there wasn't a lot of money, and so I found basically someone off the street to make me my website, right? Once my business started growing, I was able to get a budget to actually hire a professional web developer to make it into a really good, like fully functional, website. And that web developer, uh, he asked me, do you want to grow your business? Do you want to lead your industry? And I said, well, sure, that sounds great. He's like, cool, then you'll start a blog. And I said, okay. I'm like, what about other things? He goes, no, you're going to start a blog. uh, and I said, okay. And so I did. I pride myself as his most obedient student. And over the years, we meet once a month. He very directly tells me what I'm doing wrong, and subtly nods in approval at what I'm doing right. But gradually over the years, I've gotten better at it.
So how do you know that you're getting better at it? How do you know if your blog is being read or it's being effective?
Okay, so we're diving into it now. So this is like best practice number one, right? I have a nonfiction writing degree, right? So writing is very like near and dear to my heart, right? It's this creative, fun exercise of expression. And while it can be that way in a blog, you can't just willy-nilly your way through like you would in a poem or a memoir. You have to use data if you want your blog to be effective. And for most bloggers, for business owners, or if you run a nonprofit, if you have a website, Google Search Console and Google Analytics are the way that you really kind of set the trajectory of what you're going to write for. So for example, there in a few of the images that we've got, there's a screenshot that I've got of Google Search Console and what it looks like. Uh, your primary metrics are clicks and impressions. And, clicks are obviously like when someone clicks on the link. Impressions are when it comes up in Google. And so, if you've got 10 ideas on what you want to write about, but three of those ideas happen to be in line with what people are searching for and your website's coming up, you may as well write about those three things that people are actually searching for so you can get more traffic. And so Luke, my web developer, anytime I follow the data as he instructs me, we get more traffic. Every single time I have ignored data and just kind of wrote what I thought was kind of what a muse tapped in my head, right? To
Uh-huh.
write that day. I don't get traffic, right? Because I'm writing about what people aren't looking for. So using analytics, that alone will do so much.
So I'm going to throw this at you. Can you show us what Google Analytics looks like?
I can, sure.
Because I think that would be helpful. And we've got, the link and we've got those images, but, from looking at, where everybody's coming from at a different starting point, you should be able
Yeah,
to show your screen and let's
I would
see.
love.
And if you have, guys, if you have questions, go ahead and stick them in the chat or in the Q&A. Carmen's gonna, my producer and person that keeps us all going, she'll keep track of them. So, all right. So this is the Google Search Console. So how did you get there?
So this it was actually really difficult for me to figure out how to do it, but once I found a tutorial, on YouTube, it was really easy. So look for a good video on YouTube on how to access it, and that will save you a lot of time. So there is a little bit of code that Google has, and you do have to go on your website and put the code in there. It sounds fancier than it is. I don't know how to code at all. I don't know how to use HTML like at all. But
Well,
once I
that's
set up
good
my,
though. I mean, that's good.
yeah,
I want to point that out that you don't have to be a coder. I'm not a coder either.
no.
But I do know how to, like, even when I do my show notes, I
Mhm.
get the embed code. I just cut and paste it and stick it on my show notes. So there are those tools. And I think identifying and understanding that you can go to YouTube and find tutorials that'll help you with this, or ask certain resources. I'll put a link into Short Story Marketing because they would be somebody that could help. And I know they're a
Yeah.
partner for Council More as well.
Yeah, they're great. They're wonderful to work with. But
And I've worked with them
once
for years.
once you get once you get the code in your website, after a few days, a week or so, you'll have access to these analytics that you're looking at here. So this is for the last 3 months of my website. So I went down here and I'm going to search results. And I click on queries here. And I write a lot about aptitude testing, right? And about almost a year ago, uh, in one of my posts, I mentioned the other aptitude tests that are available that aren't the one that I market to my parents. And I started getting traffic from it, right? There's really three aptitude tests, other than the one, the Highlands Ability Battery. There's the Johnson O'Connor, there's Ames, and there's U Science, right? And so I mentioned them, and all of a sudden I started getting more traffic. Well, I wrote an article on each one, right? Okay, hey, this is what it does. If you don't want to go with ours, that's fine. Here's what it is. If you do want to go with ours, there you go. You have the option to, right?
Mhm.
And they're great companies. They offer great products. It wasn't like a mudslinging, post or whatever. It's like, hey, this is what we do. This is what they do. And they quickly became my best articles. People are like looking at those now. And, typically when I get a call from aptitude testing, it's because of these articles. They're like, hey, I'm looking at this Ames testing article that you wrote. So we see here click. So in the past 3 months, 31 people have clicked on it. And when people have searched for it, it's come up 1,400 times in Google. And so gradually, one thing I like to do is I'll click impressions here. Okay, so now I can see what's coming up more in Google, and that may give me, kind of more fodder and information to kind of, map out the next post. So that's how Google Search Console works. Analytics is nice. It can tell you more about kind of the overall data of your site and how often people are staying and whatnot.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
but really when it comes to writing and figuring out what you're going to say, Google Search Console is the primary tool that I use.
So how do you figure out what terms to search on? Like,
Sure. Well, there is a little bit, especially when you're starting out. There's a little bit of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, right? Like the best blog post is the one you actually write, right? So uh my web developer who mentored me through all this, Luke, he said, when I post a blog, it's because it's Tuesday at 9 a.m., not because I'm happy with it, right?
oh,
He has a deadline, right? And so
uh,
you post a few things that you believe are relevant that people would search for. And that's, you know, how do you know what stuff to write about or search for? I think writing about solving problems
mhm.
is really a good place to start. I mean, like, when was the last time you searched for just a concept and an informative concept on Google?
Right.
It's typically like, how do I change my tire? How do I get my kid into Cornell, right?
Mhm.
you know, those problem solving questions, right? If you I think starting there, and then a few weeks will go by and you'll be able to look at your data and see what terms start coming up. Does that answer your question? I don't know if I answered it right.
Yeah, no, well, and I think you bring up some other really good points. One is that it doesn't have to be perfect when you do it.
Right.
Right? So sometimes I know we as educators and entrepreneurs often feel like, well, I can't post this until it's absolutely perfect. And I know I suffer from that. I know a lot of people do. So you'll put things off and put things off. And sometimes it's just get it out there, you know, get the word out there, get it going. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. And the more you can look at the data and the better you get at figuring out, well, what phrases work and what's going to fit in with your brand and your image that you're doing. The other thing I want to point out that you talked about is people are searching to solve problems. And what we are doing, and this is part of the branding and building an identity, is you're a problem solver. So what are those problems? Aptitude test, you know, understanding careers, majors, what colleges are going to be beneficial, and you know what really brings those benefits to students. And so often we get focused on the service we provide and we forget to talk about, well, what problem are we solving? What are the benefits we're bringing to that family? Because that's what's going to motivate them. And if you can tell them in a blog, then that can be very powerful. But how does that increase your online presence? How does that build and grow? You know, you show those impressions. So then what happens? Once you get that and I write a blog, I look at, oh, I'm getting those hits, then what do I do?
Sure. So one thing to that I have to sometimes remind myself is that effective blogging is not a popularity contest. We're not trying to get views for the sake of views, right?
Mhm.
If you work in a nonprofit and you're trying to get donations, there needs to be a way, there needs to be a button or a way for them to be able to do that thing, right? With my blogs, I want people to call me and buy an aptitude test, right? So, you know, is it working? Are more people calling you? Right? That's what all this is about, right? I'm not just doing the, I mean, I do enjoy writing, right? It's fun. But if they're converting, if views are converting, then you're gonna want to keep writing, right? If there's a if the marketing channel is working for you. I will say, uh, I have found it's better to write in a series instead of
Mhm.
instead of just a one-off post. So take, for example, there was one series we did where we talked about every individual aptitude test that's available. One
Mhm.
thing that's nice about that is that after I get one post done, I know what I'm going to write about next. So I don't have
Mhm.
to I I won't have to suffer from indecision and you know kind of idea fatigue doing that. And so and when I'm done, I write an intro post, you know, 2 to 4 thousand word or more articles, and then like a wrap up post, and then I start over again, right? And then I look at the analytics and keep going. Uh, but there's never a like you're never done, right? Like once I finish a post, I talk to my web developer. I'm like, yeah, we're finished with the series. This is great. And he's like, great, okay, let's work on the next one. Doesn't matter. Yeah,
No rest for the weary,
yeah.
right? So
Mhm.
Carmen has a question. Go ahead, Carmen. I saw you turned your, and I was talking too much. So go ahead.
No worries.
The question is.
So there's a few questions. So what if you prefer numbers over letters, and how does a non-writer get started?
Numbers over letters. So I will say this. Anyone can be a writer. Maybe not everyone should be a memoirist or a novelist, right? But if you primarily look at the world through numbers, I guarantee you many of your parents do as well,
Mhm.
right? And you're going to write in a way that resonates with them more. Case in point, do you mind if I share my screen one more time?
Go ahead.
Cyndy? This is the best post on our website. This gets us more traffic. And what is it about? How much should an aptitude test cost? It's about money and numbers, right? And let's see here. So throughout this, we talk about the cost and the features of each test. I do not think about the world in numbers. This was the hardest one for me to do because, again, I'm just, I'm not exactly a poet, but I sure feel like I think like one. Like it's really hard for me to get concrete and, make spreadsheets and stuff. Uh, but I would say, I mean, if that's the angle that you want to approach your brand with, then great. Be the college counselor or the blogger who has the numerical focus. I think that's I would read that. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. If that's your approach and that's the way you think and process, that's what's going to make for a most effective blog. I think the example that I would use in our space would be John Bockenstadt, because he uses, data. He has the data tableau, and his blogs are usually pretty short and to the point, but he uses data to tell stories, and he actually calls it, I think, the data story. So someone out there can pull up John's website and post that in the chat. That would be great. But yeah, go be what's true to you. Now, one of the things I noticed in that blog that you just shared is it's not just words. You've got images, you've got links. So tell us more about that. Why is that important?
So my earlier blogs did not. Okay. And just because I was learning how to use WordPress, I was very overwhelmed with like navigating through that platform. And again, the best blog post is the one that you actually write and post. So when you want to spice things up and put some images in, I would say this: images for the sake of images, like just to beautify the post, I don't think is that compelling. Like I think it's a waste of time, right? But if, for example, I'll show you this right here. This is the Highlands whole person model. It's a diagram that we use as aptitude testing consultants to show just the different factors that go into choosing a career. At this point in the post, see how it says consider the illustration below? Like the image actually serves a purpose to teach something, right? So when it comes to picking images, I would prioritize those that actually authenticate or elaborate on your content as opposed to just a stock photo of kids and parents being happy that they just got into a college or whatever. There are a few resources, Pexels. Most of us use Canva. Canva is so easy just to, slap something together. And then, I typically do it in JPEG instead of PNG, just because we're getting into some technical things now. But my web developer says slow internet bad, fast internet good, and so the smaller the file of the image, as long as you can see it, the better. So just do it in JPEG, make sure the file isn't too big, and then just upload it on your article and move on.
Another free resource that you can use and then you can upgrade to a subscription is Pixabay. I've used that for a long time. So Carmen, you have another question.
Yes. Sorry, there's a couple coming in. So what do you think about using AI for blogging? For us, like IECs, not for writers?
What do I think about it?
Yes.
Or do I use it? Okay. We are getting into controversial territory here. There is not a single post on my website that I used AI to primarily write. Every now and then, if I am just stuck and I just really hate the way a paragraph looks, right? If I'm, in some toxic state of perfectionism, right? I'll occasionally shove it into Chat GPT and ask it to mix it up. But I mean, as wonderful and as smart as Chat GPT is, it doesn't know my business and my clients the way I do, right? And so in 4 or 5 years, maybe AI will be advanced enough to write all my posts for me. If it is, great, I'm gonna let it. But right now it's not. So I mean, the more specific your niche is, the less AI will really be able to help you write it, in my experience. And trust me, I've tried. Like I've tried. Like I would love for ChatGPT or Jasper to just write full articles for me. But right now it doesn't. So I wouldn't trust it personally, at least to write articles for you.
So I see a question of how much time do you typically spend per week writing blogs?
Yeah, I'm gonna lawyer around this question. Yeah, it it depends, right? So, you know, I see that Lynn Fuller is in here. I love Lynn to death. I will never be as organized as she is. So uh when I imagine Lynn working, like I just imagine a color-coded Google Calendar where, certain times are devoted to this. My brain doesn't function that way. I go through bouts of workaholism with other bouts of like just making sales calls for a week or two. Um, so I will say if I am diligent and I maybe spend, I don't know, two or three stints of maybe 30, 45, maybe an hour, I can typically get an article done. I'm actually a really slow typer and I'm a slow reader. Like I have the aptitude data to
Yes.
prove it. Like I mean, I don't use my pinkies, right? I just anyway, but um writing does not come natural to me. I just love it and I really enjoy it and it's just worth the sacrifice for me, right? So many of you will probably be able to churn stuff out quicker than I am, but I'd say it takes, I don't know, maybe 4 hours to get a good quality 1,000 to 1,500 word article.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Well, and it's something that the more you do, the better you get at it because you're building that experience and that approach, just like writing essays or things like that.
Exactly. Exactly.
Um, so what about other tools? So it looks like somebody else mentioned another tool that like Medium. Are you familiar with Medium? I'm not familiar with
I'm
that.
not either. I'm not either. Uh, there's a lot out there. Um, like, I mean, there's just tons. Basically, if there's a part that you hate on blogging, then like I really like the outline part, like outlining. I really like using the story brand framework,
Mhm.
focusing on solving a problem and then kind of going from there. Some people hate outlining stuff. If that's the case, ChatGPT would work great for helping you outline stuff. There's technology that exists for every
Mhm.
every aspect of the process, except for actually, writing the dang thing, right? But uh other tools, I would say this isn't exactly a tool, but it's more of like a best practice that I often see uh newer bloggers neglect to do, and that is like using proper heading formats.
Mhm.
It
Yeah.
it's it's in my very, very, very good friend, Margaret Rothy. Uh um she has taken me under her wing and unfolded a lot of the wonders in college counseling that I didn't know of. Well, I in turn have helped her with blogging, right? So with her blessing, do you mind if I show a before and after of Margaret's blogs? Okay.
And we have links to that as well.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think
So
that's something important to look at. And I want to go back to what you were saying before is just having a schedule. It doesn't have to be once a week or once a month, finding a schedule that works for you is important. But you don't want to end up with blogs that are 2 or 3 years old. You want to have, if you start, keep it going and keep it current and keep it relevant, right?
yeah, yeah, agreed. I mean, like there are older articles on my blog, but you have to get through, a few dozen articles to get to them. If all you have is like a 3-year-old blog, then I mean, I would think twice about doing business with someone who, isn't up to date on things. So yeah, making sure your content's current. So
And having
let's
said that, I know on my website, I have just like, I have a very few, there's like 3 blog posts that I've done. And it's mostly because, it's not the focus of what I'm doing. Other things are the focus.
yes. Yes, there's we talked a little bit before we got online. There are lots of like wonderful marketing channels.
Mhm.
If YouTube is your thing, then throw your, body, mind, and soul into YouTube, right? Some people, I don't know how, I haven't been able to crack the social media like Facebook code yet. Some people are really good at marketing their businesses on social media. I choose blogging because Google likes stuff on the internet, and parents search on Google for businesses, right? Uh, and so in that sense, a blog post has a longer shelf life than most social media posts, right? Like I can't speak for everyone here. Very rarely do I go back on the internet looking for an old social media post, but I will go back and look for a certain article that I read. So that's why I prioritize blogging.
Yeah.
Now,
I think that's important too, because you need to know where your audience is. And our audience, yeah, uses social media, but not from a business perspective as much. I'm sure, our audience have had different experiences. And that's why this is such a wonderful profession, because we're so content rich and you can deliver content in any all sorts of ways. But a lot of our parents are, looking under Google or doing searches. So go ahead and share what the before and after that you're talking about. And you had mentioned before about headings. Like, I didn't know that what your heading was made a difference in a SEO and in a Google search. I mean, something so simple and yet can have such an impact.
yeah, it's so Donald Miller, who I call the patron saint of marketing. Uh, I really enjoy reading his stuff. He says that every website and by extension a blog should be able to pass what he calls the grunt test. In
Mm-hmm.
other words, if a caveman looks at your blog and can't grunt his way through like what it means, then it's wrong, right? So like headings really kind of, I mean, like think of when we were in college, right? I mean, I did not read every page of text that was assigned to me in my Western Civ class,
Oh,
right? I
damn it.
yeah, you know, I scanned the headings, right? I looked for what was going to be on the test. I mean, like, don't get me wrong, it was a wonderful class. I had a great professor, but I also had other classes that I was having to read stuff for, right? And
Right.
so if we take this example, so this was an article Margaret Rothy wrote a while back. Okay, so heading 101. Your title should be in what's called H1 heading. So the way you do that, if you're on a Google Doc, let's see here. So this is an article that we're writing on Cornell. Uh, Notice how when this is highlighted, if I go to the style, it's in
Mm-hmm.
H1. So
Mm-hmm.
your title should be in H1. Okay. Now, then I have an intro here. And then notice right here, the smaller font, it's not that the font is small, it's in H2, right? So size doesn't matter as much as the way your the text is coded to read on the internet. So Google will see this and say, so like take this article here, that's an H1. This is an H2. All right. So Google knows this is the title, and this is a main point of this article, right? So if we look at one of Margaret's older posts, not much heading, right? Like I can't grunt my way through this. I don't know what it means. Now, later, okay, this is her newer stuff, right? I know exactly what this is, right? This is much more searchable and easier for me, right, to look at. So that alone, SEO, like search engine optimization, making things like nice and cute for Google, it's become kind of a buzzword. And when a buzzword is used long enough, it gets more mystified and we don't really know what it is. But my web developer said basically all the SEO practices you need for a good blog, I could write on like a 3x5 note card. It's not hard. Like, get your titles straight, write about stuff your audience wants to see, and post regularly, right? There are a few other things, you know, but by and large, that's basically it. So if all a person does is just learns how to use their headings appropriately, that alone is going to do way more for them than arguably any other recommendation I can think, except for writing regularly.
Wow. So it doesn't have to be eloquent or all of those things. You just have to have that understanding of how Google goes through and get your headings right. So that's how wonderful. So
yeah, I like easy tricks that I can immediately just, okay, I'll just change the font, you know? Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. All right, Carmen, go ahead.
How important is it to link to other sites for SEO?
That's a good question.
Okay, very good question. So this is tricky. This is me trying to use fewer words than more. Okay. Let me give you an example. So it actually does help for you to do that. However, there's a time and a place to do that. So this is one of the first articles that I wrote where when I really started, you know, trying to professionalize my blog. And I link to a few different sites here. But keep in mind, when I link to a site, anytime you link to a site, you risk the chance of someone going to that site and now not being on yours, right?
Yeah.
So, like, take for example, and this is a kind of a point of controversy with some of my my colleagues. You know, you notice I don't have socials on my site. I have social media, but I don't want people going on my social from my website because then they may see, you know, their aunt's cat video on Facebook, right? And not my stuff, right? So you have to be really mindful when you link outside of your own. So what I do, if I feel that I'm citing something that's really important, where it just makes sense to give it attribution, right? I use footnotes right here. So I go down. If they really want to go to it, they can. Right? It's all linked right here. But I typically don't have links in the middle of the article because, again, I want people to stay.
That's a good point. And that is something to think about. And it all goes back to the purpose of the blog and what you're trying to say. You know, you're demonstrating your expertise or that this is data or information that's supported through other ways and places, but not, you can still cite it sometimes, and then put it in the footnotes. I think that's a great idea. So, what next, Carmen?
What do you recommend as the best platform for blogging? Is Medium the best free platform? What do the other platforms like WordPress offer?
So it's really let me give a disclaimer here. Again, I have no coding experience, right? So I would definitely make sure it is your domain, right? Like I wouldn't do this on Tumblr. If you're trying to promote a business, whether it's your IEC practice or a nonprofit or a school, right? You want it to be on your organization's domain. I know people who have a very successful blog on Squarespace. I use WordPress, not necessarily because I think it's better than everything else, but because that's what my web developer uses. And so if you can't tell, I do everything he tells me, right? So that's what I've learned how to use. Some people have a lot of success with Wix. And I get asked this a lot. Well, what technology should what do I do this? Those are really good questions to ask, but I would argue, and I'm not trying to be coy or glib here, but figuring out what you're going to write about next is like the better question to be asking, right? Really strategizing how often you're going to post. It doesn't matter what tool you use, just so long as you're keeping your content regular and you're actually doing it.
So let's talk a little bit about, you demonstrated this, but I want to have you talk in more detail about, you mentioned that you want them to do something. That's called a call to action. So anytime we're blogging, sending emails or anything like that, we should have a next step that we're asking to do. So what does that look like? And what kind of call to actions do you use and how effective are they, Mark?
Yeah, it's all about what your business, like the way that you want to deliver your services. For me, I want them to set up a free like 15-minute call with me. So I'll share my screen once again. Let's see here. So at the very bottom, let's see here. Let me show this post.
So it looks like you've got a newsletter too. So when it says
I do.
subscribe and you get that, so are you delivering your blogs in a newsletter?
Sometimes I do. So aptitude testing is one of our flagship products. So right here, if you sign up, you can get 10% off an aptitude assessment, right? It makes sense that this would come up on an aptitude testing article. But if they want to sign up and chat with me, I have a button where they can do that right here. Because I want them, like, that's, so and that differentiates the kind of content I write. So like, take for example, I write a lot about test prep as well. Not as much as I do aptitude testing, but whenever MIT announced that they were going to start requiring the ACT again, I didn't write anything about that because that's a topic that's only going to be relevant for a few months, right? And I don't need to weigh in on that because I'm not trying to create a database of test prep info. I'm trying to be helpful to my clients so that they may hire me one day, right? So it really depends on what your business does and how you want your website to assist you in that goal. For me, it's scheduling consultations.
Yeah, and you can do that whether you're a business or a school or nonprofit. There's always some kind of call to action that you might want, whether it's donate or call to learn more about our school or our program or whatever.
Schedule a tour. Yeah.
Absolutely. How do you know if your call to action is being effective?
With me, it's easy. Am I getting calls?
Mhm.
Right? Like, are they popping up on my calendar? There are ways to program those in your analytics to tell which buttons are being done. I don't use those because it's really easy for me to tell if people are popping up on my calendar.
Mhm.
Uh, but also for my newsletter, I mean, I get data every month on that, right? Do I have more subscribers or not? Right? So uh, whatever your CTA is, it needs to be something that's like that's that's actionable in a way that you can tell, like you can measure it.
Exactly.
Uh, so if you're a high school or a private school, right, and you want to schedule tours, well, are more tours popping up on your calendar?
And one other concern that I hear people talk about a lot is they're afraid they're going to overshare.
Uh-huh.
And so, what's the difference between sharing your expertise and oversharing? Or is there a difference?
Uh-huh. Okay, so um I can only speak as an IEC, right? This may not
Mhm.
be true in other business platforms, but one of the roles an independent educational consultant serves is to be one, a repository of information, and two, to personally, fit that information around the student in a way that helps them with their application, and three, to serve as an accountability tool. Okay. Most of what I have learned in that profession, I can find on the internet somewhere. You know, I mean, like, I'm not trying to, distill the great work that we do into just something anyone can look up. But in that sense, a parent won't read an article and be like, oh, fine, I'll just have my kid do this then and not hire this person. That sounds good in theory, but will your son actually follow through with all this? Like will they use this idea right? So in that sense, it's really tricky to overshare, I think. Like I don't, you know, because you're sharing general, even if you're in a niche industry, you're still sharing general principles on your blog. And
Mhm.
so I would worry less about like if you're gonna have something written this week than, oh my gosh, am I oversharing my business secrets? Again, that's just for me as an IEC. I can't report to that in other industries. I personally have never seen an IEC overshare too much on their blog. I mean, because like one IEC that I know recently published a book, and I mean, like everything she does with students is in that book, right? Is she oversharing? I mean, no.
People are
Uh,
still going to hire her
mhm.
because they've seen the book and say, "Oh, I like this. I need to go to the person that published or wrote this and has this approach for." Yeah, no,
Well
I
said.
agree. I totally agree. I think it's a fear that we often experience, but once you build your brand and your identity, it should not just be on what you know, it's all the other things. How you solve those problems, your approach and your opinion and, your personality, it's all wrapped up into that. Recently, we had a professional at an IEC workshop, and she said, "Don't write fluff." And I think that was great advice as well. If you're going to write and you're going to spend that time, put some meat in it, and
Absolutely.
And I know people who will write things for their audience. I know, like in Texas, there's a particular things you need to know when you're doing Texas. I'm in California, I write things about how to do the UC or the CSU. And so, those are particular audience. If you work with an international student body, you can write, well, the difference between the UCAS, the Common App, and, some other applications. So there's so much. Don't worry that you're giving away everything that because it's not just what's on paper, it's that combination of everything. So,
Well said.
I think that's something for us to keep in mind. We've got just a few more minutes. So Carmen, go ahead and let's see what most pressing questions.
Okay, so how do you differentiate a newsletter versus a blog post?
Great question. So newsletters, in my experience, are very specific to each business. And I don't even mean within the industry. I mean, each business kind of has their own thing with the newsletter. So I mentioned a while back that I typically don't write articles on topics that are likely to not be relevant in a few months. I find that my newsletter is a good time for that, right? I can update parents on trends in the industry and things that they need to be aware of, right? Additionally, your newsletter can promote your blog, like putting the links and like having little blurbs or headings on what your articles are about, recent articles. But again, everything is about what service you want your followers, your viewers, your readers, your customers, right? So, I theme everything around a certain problem, right? If it's on, we sent one newsletter out about the next wave of ACT and SAT dates and the deadlines for them. And at the very end, there is a link on, to buy our ACT course if they want, right? So I guess to differentiate them, articles, long shelf life. Your newsletter is to promote your other services. And if you want to, at least the way I do it, we can promote about, kind of short shelf life topics that are trending in the industry.
Yeah. And I think, that goes back to using content in lots of different ways. So you can take a blog, reference it in a newsletter, bring in other things. Somebody asked about video blogging, you could use that. Podcast, we haven't even talked about that. Just find different ways you can use snippets from your blog in your newsletter, on your social media. LinkedIn is a really good place to share that kind of information, because parents will go onto LinkedIn and look for experts in certain areas as well. I wanted to share this book. This is one that I've used. This is by Marcus Sheridan. They Ask, You Answer. You can do this in your blogging and in your newsletters too. Find the questions that people are asking, and that's where the Google Analytics come in, and then write things based on that. So there's no one right answer, and you're going to find things that work for you, but it can be very effective. So in closing, tell us a little bit more about how this transformed your business when you started doing this, Mark.
Well, I would say this, one thing that I was very worried about is, especially when I was new in my practice, is okay, so much of what we do is word of mouth, right? But that can be so flippant at times, right? It's you're so dependent on what people are talking about and if your business is relevant enough to show up. But everyone is searching the internet, right? So I went from no views on my website 1 month to having 25. Not a huge number, right? But of those 25, one person followed.
25% increase. I mean,
Right.
like,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
100% increase.
Yeah. So but then one of those people called and scheduled an aptitude test that month, right? Next month, I had 37 people, and one person called and scheduled an aptitude test. The next, I had 58 people, and 2 people called and scheduled an aptitude test, right? And it's kept going and going and going. I mean, like I have some months that are naturally better than others. I'm looking at our analytics. It looks like we had a total of 138,000 impressions over the past 3 months, right?
Wow.
That didn't happen overnight. I've been working on this for 3 years.
Mhm.
So I would say in terms of getting new clients, it's completely changed everything, right? Most of my clients come from the internet now,
Wow.
right? Not through word of mouth. And
Mhm.
I'm grateful for parents who refer people to us, right? Uh,
But do
but
you add those to your emails? So as you're getting them through the internet and reading your blogs, are you getting their email so that you can connect with them through email?
yeah, well, especially for aptitude testing, when they see that pop up and see that they can get a 10% discount, yeah, they're going to sign up, for that. So yeah, it's all kind of rolled into that.
Yeah. Emails are not dead. That's the other thing I keep trying to, and how you use them, and don't ever get rid of emails, but using your Google and using your blog as a way to create that funnel and draw people in is a really good idea, because then you have control over when you communicate with them, what you communicate with them, what you offer them, and all of that. So if someone wants to learn more, Mark, how do they reach you?
Feel free to look at our blogs or go to my website if you want to schedule a time to chat. You can hit the free consultation button. But yeah, my website is how most people get in touch with me.
Perfect.
odysseycollegeprep.com.
Perfect. And we'll put that in the chat, and it'll also be in the show notes so that people can see an example of everything you've been teaching us today. So thank you so much. This has just been, you can tell, it generated a lot of questions, a lot of comment, a lot of thoughts. We've had people from all over the world joining us today. And thank you very much, Mark. So
Thanks for having me. This is fun. Again, it's very rare I get to nerd out this deeply about blogging. So
well, we all learned about heading sizes and things I had no idea. So everyone join me in March 1st will be our next Friday forum. We're going to have Peter Van Buskirk. The Friday forum scheduled for next week, February 16th, has been postponed. We were going to have a discussion, a really important discussion about students and student mental health, building transition into the work we do. I think it's of vital importance, and it's one of my soapboxes that I like to talk about, but we're going to reschedule that probably sometime this summer, because not everybody's going to be able to come. But we have 3 CTCL schools scheduled: Worcester, Southwestern, and Rhodes. So they'll be joining me at a later time. And Ann Moreno from the CTCL, she's the executive director, will be joining me later. So no Friday forum next week. Our next one will be March 1st. And we're going to be talking about lots of different things in the upcoming months. I'll have a session on the FAFSA, the whole financial aid. We all know what a state that is in at the moment. So
tell me about it.
it's just like, yeah, having had a technology company and been down that road before, I knew it's like, they say this is going to work. I know it's not. So thank you again, everybody, and check your emails. Let everybody know about talking about call to action. Let everybody know about Friday forums, and have them go to my website at cindymcdonald.com. And Mark, what is your website again?
odysseycollegeprep.com.
Okay. All right. Everybody have a great weekend. We'll see you next time.
You're one of the good guys, Cindy. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.